context, everything's contingent. So if we experienced another 9/11, you would see an upswell in patriotism and nationalism. If the context changed, national identity and national feeling and communal feeling can be triggered. So there were millions of Jews who were completely indifferent to Israel, and then when Israel won the 1967 war, their latent Jewish identity was triggered. So national identity is fairly natural, and it can be triggered. And if events change, then people's reactions and identities will change. So one minute people may put a priority on playing video games and getting laid and making more money, but you have another 9/11 and people will start having block parties. People will start gathering with their neighbors. People will start flying the flag. People will start volunteering to fight in the armed forces. People will start volunteering to visit old sick people. So events can change identity.
I think that what you say certainly is how things have traditionally gone. But as we've seen with COVID, something that really should bring people together, metaphorically, if not literally, because of the nature of the disease, it has not done so. Traditionally, in a time like a pandemic, people do rally together in one way or another to support each other, but it's only made America more divided. I think that if there were another 9/11 today, it would only further division within the country. One side would blame the other side for it, and it would create, I think, some really nasty stuff. Socially, politically, maybe even economically. So I think that America is sort of beyond this thing where people can come together in a time of crisis to rally around a common identity. I would say certainly there's much more of an enriching, coherent identity in being Jewish, regardless of which strain of Judaism one follows, regardless of what one's amount of Jewish heritage is, if any. But there's certainly something much more inherent, much more cohesive, much more enriching about a Jewish identity than a present day American identity, which is almost undefinable because nobody can really say what America stands for today in any sort of cohesive cultural or moral sense. The country is very much at odds with itself.
Well, I think it would have been conceivable that the pandemic could have brought us together if our political leadership and other leaders had acted differently. So, for example, in Australia, the government and the opposition rallied to propose and carry out policies around which there was coherence, around which there was broad-based agreement. So the ruling Conservative coalition and the opposition Labor Party essentially agreed on COVID policies, and so there weren't these political fights over COVID such as you had in the United States. So I think if Donald Trump and Republicans and Democrats had played things differently, we may well have had an upswell in national feeling. I mean, look at what happened in Europe, where people were going on their balconies and singing together. You didn't have that nearly as much in the United States, but I think it could possibly have been triggered. I just remember when I was in high school, I didn't really give two hoots about my high school. And then suddenly one day I had a different feeling. And suddenly I was like, I was a proud Placer Hillman. And I don't know exactly what happened, but an identity which meant nothing to me suddenly got one day near the end of high school. And so I still think that American national identity can be triggered to come to the.
A few things there before we do get to Streamlabs. I think that when one looks what happened is what you mentioned in Europe. That's because these places, even though they've had great demographic change, they still do have at some level, a stronger national cultural identity than the US does. And so, even when they are in the situation of having their culture subjected to all these very strong alterations, there still is something that binds them that could come up in a time of crisis to function, as it did when you saw people singing on their balcony.